Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Inshallah, everyone is doing well. Let me. Okay. So today, inshallah, we'll be continuing from the 25th word. I can't share my screen right now. I mean, it's not a must, but if we want to follow along the text, I could, if that's preferred as well. Okay, that's good. So, inshallah, we'll be continuing from the 25th word, which has been about the miraculousness of the Quran. The last several weeks, we've been studying the fifth, like the fifth note or fifth point, perhaps, or indication, which has been about the exposition, the style of exposition of the Quran. And in this particular part, we've been going through verses from chapter 52 that have been a series of questions, sort of rhetorical, but also addressing different claims that people might bring to the Quran. So inshallah, my intention is to maybe I'll read like 2 paragraphs and then we can continue from there, and I'll share some of my takeaways, and we'll see what you guys have to take away or share in return. So Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So I'm beginning with the verse from chapter 52, verse 42. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Or do they intend a plot against you? But those who defy God are themselves involved in a plot. Or like two-faced dissemblers and cunning atheists, whose natures are corrupted and consciences rotted, do they want to deceive the people and turn them away from the guidance which they cannot obtain, to trick them and so call you either a soothsayer or possessed or a sorcerer? Do they want to make others believe what they do not believe themselves? Don't think of these insidious charlatans as human beings. Don't be saddened at their wiles and denials and lose heart. Rather, increase your efforts, for they only deceive their own souls and harm themselves. And their successes in evil are temporary. It is a divine stratagem, drawing them to perdition by degrees. And here he moves on to the second part from the Quran, from, again, chapter 52, verse 43. Or have they a God other than God? Exalted is God, far above the things they associate with him. Or like the Magians who imagined 2 separate gods called the creator of good and the creator of evil. Or like the idolaters and worshippers of causes who attribute a sort of godhead to different causes and imagine each of them to be a source of support for them. Do they rely on other gods and contest you? Do they consider themselves free of any need of you? That means they have become blind and do not see the perfect order and flawless harmony throughout the universe, which is as clear as day. For in accordance with the decree from chapter 21, verse 22, were there gods other than God in the heavens and the earth, there surely would have been confusion in both. So in accordance with this, if there are 2 headmen in a village, or 2 governors in a town, or 2 kings in a country, order is turned upside down and harmony spoiled. But from a fly's wing to the lamps in the heavens, such a fine order has been observed that it leaves not so much space as a fly's wing for partners to be associated with God. Since the above act in a manner so opposed to reason, wisdom, feeling, and what is obvious, don't let their lies put you off proclaiming the message. So let me return back to where we started. I think this is a really interesting verse. as Nursi is explaining it here, the route that he's taking is that those who may be trying to proclaim a different worldview or cover up the obviousness in some respect of the Quranic message of divine unity in the world, that their attempts to do so kind of fall back onto them. And he says, for they only deceive their own souls and harm themselves. And in one respect, I understood this as saying that, if you plot against belief, and that you spend all your energy, you spend all your time trying to convince others that these, certain beliefs are unwarranted, they aren't rational, they are just, beliefs from the past of more primitive people, etc., and whatnot. In the end, you are still adopting a worldview that will deprive your life of meaning, that will deprive your life of the mercy of your creator, because you cut off that relationship. You deprive yourself of the relationship intrinsic to for example, the phrase Rabbi, right? Of my Lord, my educator, my sustainer, my nourisher, my caretaker, who takes me from one stage of my life to another stage of my life, so that I may progress and come to understand my reality better. At the end of the day, like those who may do so, as he says, whether they're cunning atheists or anyone who's covering up um, the reality of humans, the reality of this existence, faces their own result, which is that of meaninglessness, which is that of not seeing compassion in this world. And so that's one respect, in which we can try to understand this verse. And in this specific part, Nursi's kind of saying that we shouldn't pay too much attention to them, because they're going to face the results of their own efforts accordingly. I guess one other way, and after this, I'll kind of open it up to you guys. One other way that I thought about this was that this is something that doesn't just happen to, the naturalists or the atheists, but also myself, right? I've lived today. I was listening to the chaplain of my university, and he was sharing what he thought was the biggest challenge that he thinks, students, people face at this time, which is that we don't just have secular and atheist institutions, but we have secularizing and atheizing institutions, right? There's an active effort there. And at least for myself, I have definitely lived my whole educational career, if you will, going through by virtue of where I live. And I think it doesn't really matter at this point where you live, you go through it anyway. That I've lived through going through these secularizing and atheizing institutions, whether I realize it or not, whether they're obvious or not, whether they declared or not. And so it impacts and affects, if I don't counteract it with a different strand of education, in this instance with a Quranic education, with a Quranic worldview, then it sort of kind of I can't think of the word exactly, but it kind of seeps into my attitude, in the most mundane attitudes that I may have. I'll say, oh, these cookies are so good. Look how well my homemade recipe turned out. Look at how amazing of a baker I am. And that's the moment in which my plot turns against me. that is when my treatment of those cookies deprives me of the sweeter, more exalted and eternal taste of divine mercy and divine compassion. So I think in many ways and everyone can think for themselves, I can reflect on the many ways in which I do plot against divine unity or my own reality, the truth of my own reality. I may plot against it in my attitude towards something like cookies. I may plot against it in my attitudes towards qualities that I think I have, or that may manifest through this and that, through my work or through my school or through my relationships. I may plot against myself the moment I think I'm so compassionate towards someone. But in those situations, although I think that I'm sort of either consciously or perhaps not as consciously thinking that I'm just kind of attributing something to myself, I'm still doing a disservice to myself. I am the one that ends up in a plot, that plot being depriving myself of the greater meaning there. If I dismiss a certain situation or a certain experience as just due to A and B and C, then I deprive myself of the greater meaning there. If I dismiss it as a coincidence, if I dismiss it as something random, I deprive myself of the opportunity there to forge and to further my relationship with the source of existence that is bringing me into that situation. So those are some thoughts that I had about this verse in specific, and because I think this one especially is at least very easy to kind of dismiss it away as, well, I'm not plotting against God or truth, or I'm one of the goodies, not the baddies. But I think in many ways I find myself plotting to my own detriment. So Brother Yusuf, you can go ahead.
Jazakallah khair for the comments. I think, yes, when we take it as, the verse, it says, أَمْ يُرِيدُونَ كَيْدًا فَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا هُمُ الْمَكِيدُونَ. So in there is a general term that is being used for denial. In the translation, they say who defy God. But in the verse, it's a more general term. It says, فَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, so simply deniers. And apparently the author is taking it from the point of view of, maybe primarily, I wouldn't say exclusively, but primarily from what Prophet is saying, or the denial of Prophet and Prophet's message, which then leads to denial of the Creator as well. But if I focus on this aspect, like the denial of the messenger, so the author says those people, or there are some people who are denying the messenger, or they themselves are not believing in the messenger, because he says there's a guidance which they cannot obtain. And to trick people, they make a plot against the message and the messenger. So they say this somewhat of a plot. Plot is an interesting term actually in here, because at the very beginning of the verses that we were studying, it came up with saying that, oh, he is mad, he is a sorcerer, these sort of things. Like still coming up with an explanation, like by saying that, oh yeah, he says something, but what he says should be discredited because he's a sorcerer or because he's a madman. So there's always some sort of a reasoning that is being provided to deceive the people, because otherwise the message is right there. So once you start evaluating the message, its truth is so obvious. but you need to come up with a cover story which is going to justify that it's not worthy to be considered. So as if this attitude of discrediting the messenger is being used in order to hide the message that he brings in, the message being both the scripture and also how he is living through that scripture. Like his life itself is also a huge message, which is the embodied scripture. So by taking this attitude, actually, those people, again, I'm for now, allow me to put it outside. So such an attitude is, although they themselves are not able to take the message, they are trying to prevent some others. So which in itself is an interesting case. Why would somebody do that if we think about it? So I don't have an answer to that for now. I'll be very happy to hear. But this attitude of discrediting messenger, I think this is what I would like to underline in here. And the author says by doing that, actually they are harming themselves, because distancing nobody else but themselves from the messenger and the message more and more. Because it hurts them more than it hurts others. And he adds another sentence, because apparently they're also harming other people. But he says, no, their successes in evil are temporary. So, because personally, when I see such a thing that's happening outside, like some people trying to discredit messenger and eventually the message of the messenger, I start feeling quite worried, actually, because even I'm observing such a case nowadays within a very close circle, which makes me feel quite worried, to be honest. And I am observing a success in that sort of an effort in there too. But the author is saying that their success in evil are temporary. That part is also not very clear to me why he says it's temporary. Apparently, he's saying that they are harming themselves primarily, not even primarily, but exclusively. But why is he saying that? This part is also not clear to me. Why they do not harm the others, which apparently is the case. So I guess so far I didn't give any answers, but maybe put more questions. So let me stop with that. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you, Brother Yusuf. I think those are really great questions that we should think about, and if anyone wants to respond to them, they should feel free to. Yeah, I think one other part that, following sort of your comment that drew my attention was that these two-faced dissemblers and cunning atheists are those, because this is the descriptive part of the sentence, whose natures are corrupted and consciences rotted. And I think that in a certain respect is key to why such people would want to engage in ensuring other people don't believe, right? Something about, if there's someone who's sincere, who has questions, and who doesn't believe for one reason or another, or hasn't been convinced yet, and maybe they identify as atheist or otherwise, that's one thing, and you can put that aside. But then, using the verbs that he uses here, to trick them, to ensure that people don't believe. There is a sort of ill will, if you will, to that attitude, I guess. So I mean, there's some more to say, but I have a hand next to me, so I'll give it to that hand.
Assalamu alaikum. So I don't know if I have answers, but I want to approach the verse from the side of the one being plotted against and also the one that's plotting, that's doing the plotting. And when I um, observe my life, I see that the biggest people that are plotting against me are the ones that are selling me the story of live your life, enjoy your life, live it as full as you can, with all the pleasures that you can reach, grab everything that's like will increase your comfort, your joy, your luxury, your wealth, your popularity, fame. Don't listen to any other boundaries. Just live your life according to this. Like this, these are the principles that are being sold to me. And sometimes, and they're sold like this is what will give you happiness. It's sold in a light that your happiness is through the material things that you need to go out there and get. And it's like a plot because I mean, it's a very like they do great marketing about it, all the movies, everything you watch or everything you consume. And when I consider like, there's like a plot in here because I know that once I do like go down that path, there's nothing waiting for me. There's no light at the end of that tunnel. You start going into, as was mentioned earlier in discussion, that you will die. You'll go into non-existence. There's no meaning to anything anymore with that kind of a worldview. Like the thing they're calling me towards, this happiness that they're selling so amazingly, and everyone's just like seems so calm. They seem so relaxed. Everyone's just going about their lives. This happiness they're selling, it's very attractive, but then I see that it leads nowhere. It's like a plot. And I imagine that these people that are selling it are very aware of this plot as well. They're very aware of how weak of a foundation they have. So I imagine they must be in their own plot. And really, I don't have to imagine them. I can just think about myself when I actually just like, I go down such paths or I don't spend my time in great ways, that I can feel that emptiness within me as well, where I'm just like living in a very material way.
So what's in it for them?
What's in it for them?
Yeah.
I mean, and then going from, I guess that's like from the perspective of the one that's doing the plotting, which is what I want to get to next. Thank you for the nice segue. What's in it for them, or what's in it for me? Like, why would I want other people to follow my beliefs? I guess, isn't there like, it reminded me of, I don't know how accurate this is, but like when Darwin, initially he was a believer, but then he lost his family and then he wanted to disprove God. So he came up with his own theory like that. Like it just like happened by itself. So I guess like when you go through hardships or you want other people to follow down your like wrong path. You want them to also like you want to disprove that God exists, let's say, or you want to disprove that there's a meaning to anything when things don't go the way you like. Like that I think the words that says defy God are very, very important because let's say you're very unhappy with how your life is going at a certain moment. You want to defy God at that moment. You're angry with him. You have like anger with the way your life is going. You can't submit yourself to your fate. Let's say you have an accident, let's say you're paralyzed, you get cancer, I don't know, all these different things that can happen. It's so easy to just want to defy God and disprove it and try to get everyone on the same boat, and with whatever means possible. You find maybe like comfort in the numbers, like everyone just echoing the same thing, the saying, oh, there's no God, being very smug about it, and like just when everyone repeats the same thing, then you feel more comfort in that. So I think it's out of like a base of anger. I mean, looking at myself, like if when I go through such things, like there's like anger or there's like denial, there's like lack of will to submit or like be content with what you have, or like lack of gratefulness, I think is a very important word. So like I think you would be plotting when you lack gratefulness and because of anger and you just want to somehow rebel against like what your creator has given you. I mean, that's just like maybe my initial thoughts about why someone would want to plot.
Yeah, that's really helpful. It kind of makes me think of, I don't know, we may see these in toddlers, but I think we see it in grown-ups as well, of the attitude of, if I can't have a cookie, you can't have a cookie either. And I mean, I don't know. It's difficult to. I think for me, it's difficult to approach this from well, let me get into their inner psychology and try to understand what's going on. Like, yeah, I can do that, and maybe I'll come up with pretty like accurate diagnoses. I don't know. But the matter of the fact is that they do it, or I go through it, and asking myself the question of, do I do it? In what ways do I do it? Like, obviously, it's multifaceted. You can approach this verse from many ways, and not just an I perspective, but also in a very sort of, sociological perspective. Um, and I guess it's interesting because it says, they want to deceive the people and turn them away from the guidance which they cannot obtain. And guidance that they cannot obtain. Why can't they obtain this guidance is a question. Are they, if I cover up my windows with a dark curtain, then I can't experience the sun. I can't obtain the sunlight. I can't experience it. I'm just kind of stuck in a shadowy, gloomy room. But at the end of the day, I chose to close the curtains. I chose to close the shades. I chose to deprive myself of that sunlight. So I think fundamentally there is always a choice involved there of whether you can or cannot obtain guidance, whether you ask for it or you don't ask for it. But I guess it's perhaps sort of like closing the curtain and wanting everyone else to close their curtains as well. If I can't reach the sunlight, no one else should. But I mean, some of the questions that Brother Yusuf laid out still remain of how is it that these successes in evil are only temporary? And why is it, I suppose, that that there are people involved in such plots in the first place? And then I'm also curious about this notion of a divine stratagem. I'm not quite sure what that means. And then one final thing I wanted to say, because I just remembered Brother Yusuf also kind of emphasized this, was plotting against or denying the notion of messengerhood, or prophethood, perhaps, right? And I think that's so critical. Like, we'll have, even in our times right now, we'll have people who may say, okay, well, a creator exists, but messengerhood is kind of trivialized, or made redundant. And I think it's not focused upon as much as it should be. So that's also another, I think, line of thought we should try to explore. But I saw that Brother Kareem had his hand up, so I'll give it to you. If you still want to talk, I know there's like briefly a hand up, but if you do, you can feel free to. If not, not sure if anyone else has any comments they'd like to make. Okay, Brother Kareem, go ahead.
Yes, can everybody hear me just before I start
Yes,
talking?
perfectly.
All right. Well, one thing I thought of, or like one phrase that came up to my mind, well, Allah, deemed this thought to be in my mind, is that how can a character in a story influence the plot whatsoever? And through that line of questioning, I started thinking about stories, whether they're in movies or written or in any way, even orally demonstrated or transmitted. Often we see characters struggling and fighting with their circumstances and the properties of the plot they're in. And they could have an attitude sort of that feels like they are challenging the overall plot or the overall circumstances or tenets of their universe. But are they really gaining anything in terms of changing the course of the plot. I don't see it. It might be their experience or their choice to see it that way, and just like you said, you chose to close the curtain. They chose to think that they could go beyond the plot. Therefore, they are the ones that are in, the scheme is, or the plot is surrounding them. They will never get to the plot per se. It's somewhat of an incomplete idea, but like that's my take on the usage of plot or kaid, as the Arabic word is. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Kareem, for sharing those thoughts with us. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, what else do others think? I mean, we have a lot of questions that are posed here, and I think it's easy to just breeze through it, but it might be fruitful to approach the text through the framing of our questions. And I see that Brother Mohammed Said has a hand up, so I'll give it to
Assalamu alaikum. Before the discussion started, I was going through the text. The first things came to my world were like this way. I would like to share them. I think they are all connected with the comments that are shared so far, but I am not able to really address any the questions directly, but would like to share my the reflections in my world. The first thing got my attention is the first sentence, that the way the author is trying to understand this verse: two-faced dissemblers and cunning atheists. It seems, the first time it seemed like they are too far away from each other. These two situations, these two choices are not related. But the first one especially, the two-faced dissembler, I felt like the verse, the guidance in this verse is to tell me that if I don't position myself to receive guidance, maybe with the definitely, as you pointed out, the education, the training that I go through, that I have so far, maybe it helped me to put myself in the position not to receive anything from a message that talks to my reality, that is there to help me with the meaning of my existence. If I don't take it, if I do not open myself to it, I think automatically I kind of, that's the plot. I am not opening myself to receive, but for some reason, which is really, again, in my own reality, it is very possible not to be in the position to receive, but at the same time claim something that, I have something, or I not positioning myself to receive, but at the same time positioning myself to give, let's say, to enlighten, whatever it is. I think this verse is really helping me to open myself to receive from this message that tells me that everything in me and everything outside of me needs to be made, has to be created, and to receive this message, I need to open myself to this reality. And if I do not, this is a plot against the messenger and the message. But in reality, I am putting myself in this plot. I am, because not being able to receive means staying in darkness. But as a human being, I am able to still say the words that the message carries to me. I can still use the same words. So maybe I can still showcase. I think that's the real plot for me. Let's see. Yeah, as the author puts a question here, that do they want to make others believe what they do not believe themselves? That was a real good question for me to see here. I'm very thankful for that. So this is not the purpose of the message. The message is telling me that you don't force yourself to be this way or that way. You just need to receive it. That's what you needed. And, you know, then whatever reflects on you, whatever is organically fitting in you, it will be on your, it will be reflected in your words, in your life. This is not something that you have to force yourself, but just to receive it. This is what I am understanding so far from the verse with the comment of the author. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Muhammad Said, for those lovely thoughts. Those were really helpful for me, and I was also kind of struck as you were talking by that same question. They want to make others believe what they do not believe themselves. I think that's really important. Let's just go by way of hands. Brother Sohail, and then H. Beza, and then I think Brother Yusuf also had his hand up at one point, so I'll leave it to you guys.
Assalamu alaikum. I joined a bit late, so I'm not sure if I'm repeating what some others have said. I think something I took away looking at the verse, what I took away from it through a different light. From the perspective of who's like speaking in the Quran, and the one speaking is, one who by definition must be all knowledgeable and all powerful and all willing. So, what's interesting is that, if I were to listen, if I have some doubt or like some sort of, weakness in how I see the world or belief, and I have a doubt or concern, or I'm not sure. It's almost as if that by divine will in and of itself, and not almost as if, I'm sure that it is, that the sort of plans or ideas of people who want to lead you away from the truth, they become obvious in like the public forum. For example, maybe you talk to other people, people who are, atheists or agnostic or materialists. You listen to them, you hear about them, people talk about them, and it's almost as if like they have some sort of scheme in mind, but in reality, when you step back and look at it, it's the plan is far greater than they could imagine, because those individuals, they're put in places such that when you listen to them and think about them, if you're honest with yourself, it's almost like that they're presenting you the idea of denial and showing you how ridiculous it is, so that you don't have to do it yourself. You can just hear it from it. It means something, at least to me, when I hear somebody deny, that doesn't come from within my own consciousness, like some sort of whispering coming to me, but it means something even more when I see it on the outside. I see it and I listen to it. I'm like, wow, this is really ridiculous, at least for me. And this doesn't make any sense. Like, if this is where my doubt could go or lead me, then it ends up nowhere, because I see where they've taken that idea and they're being, irrational or unhuman. There's nothing human about that conclusion. And to me, it's like I said, it's almost as if this is it's a divine plan. Not that people are determined to be, atheist, but those people are, by their own choice, think that they're, the ones trying to deceive the world, but it's the world as if the rather they've been deceived or been self-deceived themselves. And you step back and you see the greater cosmic or divine plan, and you see that these individuals are just there to show you how wrong denial is. That's what I took away from being the object or involved in a plan, the plan being the divine plan. That's my interpretation of that plan from a different perspective, if that makes sense. So I guess just to summarize, my responsibility is just to listen or to pay attention to what, not necessarily pay attention to what these people are, but when I hear them, look at it from the perspective of, does it correspond to my human reality? And if it doesn't, what sort of message am I receiving from my creator? That this is not you, this is not human, this is not who you are. And you should, in a way, be the opposite, or lead your life in a completely different manner, literally 180 degrees, because the two have nothing in common.
Thank you, Brother Suhail. That was really helpful for me, and kind of clarified in some respects how we can understand plot here. Yeah, thank you, and made it very practical as well. H. Beza had her hand up, so don't want to miss out on that.
Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, I just wanted to, I too also joined a little late, so apologies if anything is repeated or was covered. I was thinking, as I was listening to these comments, I was thinking about the questions that Aisha Noor and Abdurrahman posed earlier about what's in it for me, to drag someone else into the mud with me, if that's the case. And as was said, in such an act, it indicates some sort of form of malintent. And then, so I was asking myself, as we study these every week, like how is my life different if I have a certain different worldview than someone else, if a certain atheist has a certain worldview, and essentially it affects my response in my day-to-day events, and it also shapes my attitude, and essentially it determines to whom I am submitting myself to. So when I do not have that vertical connection with my creator, then I am very susceptible to going with the flow. And by that I mean following a certain tradition, a fashion, living my life in a certain way, or having certain beliefs regarding certain people versus other people. Perhaps someone's better than the other, or whatever the case is. But if I am to live with the consciousness that belief offers me, then my essential loyalty and my allegiance is not due to my boss or to the trendsetters or to the president or to the country or to the company or to the state, but it's due to my creator. So in a way, it severs, it cuts that cord of power that figures of authority in one form of another or another can have over me. insofar as me acting as a sort of puppet in their schemes. And so in that case, if my loyalty or my allegiance is due to something beyond the state, then there is no power, or the power cord, or the means of establishing some sort of dominion over my life by other people is cut. So it's a direct threat to say to a system of power or oppression or submission, or a way of redirecting or directing the masses to gain some sort of either wealth or a means of power, and essentially at the expense of other people or someone else. And we often see this in our practical lives, in just the way the system is set. I was talking about building credit histories and stuff like that with someone recently, and even just the way the system is set is in such a way where you have to do you have to borrow money you don't have to establish a sort of credibility for yourself, which goes against, I think, you essentially have to become a slave of some sorts, or play a role in the system of slavery of sorts, in order to hand people the cards that they want, or in order to get things done or whatever. Anyway, that's just like just an example, but I think it essentially just stretches out to every minute part of our lives, in practically speaking, and in the education system, and the way that we go about our finances or whatever. And so especially since belief is such a one-on-one matter, that it's such a personal matter that's between me and my creator. It's not between me and anyone else. So I think what's in it for me, or what's in it for them, I think has a lot to do with the power, with the fact that without there's sort of a sort of human, like an inherent weakness to humanity, and it's this weak spot, or exploiting it, or taking advantage of it, or forcing people to live a certain way, and in doing that, having some sort of influence over them, and essentially having some sort of power and some sort of personal gain. So, and perhaps at the same time, in having that horizontal connection, if I only have that horizontal connection, at the center of my world is me. I'm submitting to nobody but myself, or to other people. But if I'm at the top, then I'm essentially self-worshiping. And to even consider the idea of submitting myself to somebody else, it can be a very like, how dare you sort of moment, because it really causes one to, I guess, deflate the ego, is what I'm looking for, these words. So I don't know, those are just some thoughts that came to me as I was listening, but I think there's always some sort of ulterior motive, or some other scheme, or there's always there's an advantage that looks to somebody, and usually, unfortunately, at the expense of other people, and perhaps even at the expense of themselves, at the expense of losing one's own humanity. You gain some sort of influence or power. So yeah, those are just some thoughts.
Thank you, H. Beza. I always really enjoy listening to your thoughts. And I would say that it's always at the expense of one's own self, And I also just want to, before we go to Brother Yusuf, I want to think a bit more about the sentence here where Nursi says, don't think of these, because it's a little, I don't know what to make of it. It says, don't think of these insidious charlatans as human beings. So I just wanted to see how we can also think of that. And Brother Yusuf, you've very patiently waited. Thank you so much. Please go ahead.
Well, actually, this sentence and the sentence that you just mentioned, and the last sentence, which says it's a divine stratagem driving them to perdition by degrees. So because one tends to have this question, why does the creator allow such people in the first place? Or see, Zainab also wants to make a comment. So why does such things happen? Because yeah, I might be, well, maybe first I'll refer back to the very beginning. Two-faced dissemblers means munafiqs. So the word was a little bit of a high degree word, tough word for me. So the simple translation for that would have been hypocrites. So hypocrisy and denial highlights an intention or a decision that is made before evaluating any truth. So this one was something interesting in here, because someone who has this attitude, someone who had already decided about the conclusion beforehand, it might be, I'm pretending to believe in the creator because I have a better status in the community, or I want to find the messengerhood questionable, although I truly believe in the existence of the creator. I would like to maybe argue against the messengerhood as messenger being a human, because then the creator will start messing up with my life, which I don't like really. So in the first place, I already arrived to a conclusion. I don't want the creator to mess up with my life. Therefore, for example, I am raising some questions about the messenger. Or I want to be an important person, so I find a position in the Muslim community or in the believers community. This is why I say I believe in the creator. So in either way, so the hypocrisy or so the denial are there, but they are, the decisions are already there before you start evaluating what's in front of you. But with such a mindset, yeah, there are people, I might be one of them, who put forward some plots. But then one can ask the question, but why does that happen? Because it makes me worry about myself. I wouldn't like to be deceived for sure. And deceiving means somebody is putting another mask on their face and they look quite okay. And I might get deceived by them. So it makes me worried, and for myself and for others also. But as if the author is saying here that actually this is within the creator's will. The creator wants such things to happen. But what is the outcome of that? So definitely those people are harming themselves. Yeah, that's granted. So they are doing something evil and they are being punished with their own evil. This is perfect justice. But how about the people that are being influenced by them negatively? So it looks like as if such things are becoming a tool for people to have something to compare. Like maybe by those people suggesting the wrong, somebody, me, will evaluate it as if it's true. Then I will go in the wrong direction. I will taste the harm in my belief. And then I will realize that, oh, this is why I shouldn't have followed this path. This is why that path was wrong. So Abdurrahman gave the example of some, let's say, the idea of evolution or any false ideas out there. So I might consider them to be true and keep following them. But actually, by following this wrong path, I am getting a chance to, an opportunity to see that it hurts and it doesn't make sense, which makes me realize, like such darkness makes me realize the value of the light. So this is where I guess the divine stratagem or the divine trickery is in play. The creator is as if utilizing the wrong will of such people to the good outcome of a believer eventually, or not in general for human, because by following this line of thought or this stratagem, you are arriving to the conclusion that, yeah, the darkness is horrible. I tasted it and I know that it's better. And now I can distinguish right from wrong. And it was harmful, but eventually it turned out to be good for me. And I'm thankful to the Creator for employing such a person's ill will to my good eventually. So in a sense, it's pretty much similar to how Satan is being employed in the existence. So Satan's duty is to trick people. How, like, if you take the imagery of Satan in the scripture, Satan is willingly tricking people to say that, well, actually, you know why you are expelled from the heaven? Because God didn't want you to become eternal. So this is definitely covering up some truth with a trickery. But this descending of human from the heaven makes human realize that he was in the heaven in the first place. So a way to realize his neediness and then offer his thanks to the Creator. So this sort of trickery at the end helps me. And applying it to prophethood, again, within the context of this entire chunk of verses that we are studying. So intending some trickery to the messenger and messengerhood, yeah, such ideas are out there. And they are trickery because they are not explicitly, I mean, in today's setup, for instance, I heard one such trickery which says, yeah, the messenger was a very smart, very good man. And the person who says this is an agnostic. So by definition, he says, or she says, belief in God is not possible because you can neither prove nor disprove. So this is already the decision of that person in the first place. Yet she makes a comment about the messenger being a good person, which sounds, yeah, even that person is confirming the truthfulness of the messenger. Yet she says, yeah, it was not revelation what she took. Or another thing she says is, well, he was good, but the people that followed him were illiterate. So they didn't understand what the messenger was saying, which practically disconnects messenger from the following generation. So it's another trickery again, because especially if you are born into a Muslim family and you have some goodwill towards the messenger, when that person initially says the messenger was a good man, you say, oh, see, a Westerner is confirming the good character of the messenger. So you start feeling some positive attitude towards what that person is going to say next. But then that person says the Sahaba were illiterate, so they didn't really understand what the messenger was saying. So as if the message is cut. Then if I swallow this second, like the first one was a bait and the second one is what was intended, then prophet becomes practically inaccessible to me. So the goal is achieved. The person himself in the first place was an agnostic, saying that you can neither believe nor disbelieve. Now I'm at the same ship with that person. So that trickery, this is what I'm trying to say about this trickery part, is out there. But once I realize what's going on in here, actually it makes me realize how important Sahaba is for me to get connected with the messenger. So then I say, well, they are not illiterate simply. You cannot dismiss people based on just intellectual level, because it's not all about that. Yes, it's a good tool to achieve truth. And there were learned people among Sahaba as well, but this is not the whole picture either. So it was not a correct statement either. So this becomes, tying it back to why it's a divine stratagem. So that person being involved with such a trickery had become very useful for me to realize the importance of Sahaba for myself, for instance. Just wanted to highlight that part.
Thank you, Brother Yusuf. That was a really helpful and I think very needed comment and thought process. And I guess also in conjunction with what Sohail was saying, like, at least for myself, you know, today, for example, I was listening to someone and I read like their whole paper that they're working on, trying to defend a view of the afterlife in a sort of very materialistic way. So not in a literal sense, but that, you know, people sort of live on through the people who remain, either through their memories or the ways in which they shape them, etc., etc. And you know, some parts of the argument were good and solid, but I guess, you know, it's so unsatisfactory. However you look at it, that person who dies is still in that perspective completely gone. Yeah, like their memories may remain in me, and the way they influenced my life may remain, or shaped my character may remain, but that doesn't change the fact that they're completely annihilated. And in many ways, it was just a further confirmation of the fact that, you know, as human beings, we have this very dire need to not be annihilated. And not just in the sense that, oh, I want the people who I care about to remember me, or I don't want my name to disappear. Yeah, I mean, there might be that too, but also like I want to continue existing and experiencing in the full-fleshed way that I currently do. And I guess the reason why I'm sort of mentioning this is because you know, that's just one example. I'm not saying that that person was, you know, in the category of what the text is talking about here, but when hearing about, I guess when one becomes a listener to those who may want to perpetuate certain falsehoods, those moments become opportunities for me to renew my own convictions and to reinvestigate and also conclude upon again the beliefs that I have come to believe through reflection and through reasoning and through experience. And in many ways, I guess that is one of the ways in which they themselves are involved in a plot, right? And I think on just another level, like this whole paragraph here reads very much like, you know, if you ever watch any of those old war movies, you know, you'll have like the king or like the leader kind of on their horse, and they'll give like this really passionate, like, I don't know, Henry V speech. And then afterwards they like, you know, they ride into battle and they win after being sort of motivated by that verbal speech. And here in many ways it kind of feels like that, you know, by saying, you know, don't lose hope, or don't lose heart, their successes are only temporary. And I suppose in one ways it is because like the state of my soul, if you will, or the state of my convictions are being fought over ideologically, intellectually, philosophically, however you want to put it, you know. Everyone's fighting for a stake in it, for a part in it. And yeah, that's, I mean, those are some thoughts that occurred to me, but Brother Sohail, you can talk.
You know, it's kind of interesting you just said that, because it's something that occurred to me just while you were talking. In the way the verse is phrased, it's as if it's almost saying that, or okay, so do you kind of see also what society or civilization does as a plot, kind of like Khadija Mirza was saying, in that, I mean, do you see yourself being part of their plan? You know, some sort of deception that you're just a pawn in all of it, honestly, and you don't even realize it, and you think you have some sort of authority over yourself. but really you're just owned by someone else, some other mere mortal who's going to, shuffle off this earth just like you will. And people don't realize that. They don't really take the time to think about that. And in a sense, it's almost as if saying, the Quran is saying, like, is prophecy, kind of to what Yusuf was alluding to, is prophecy seen as a plot? And I have never once heard genuinely anybody call the prophets or the companions plotters. No historian. I've never heard of an, or I've never read them. Read any of these Orientalists, but just in public discourse, no one's ever said, like, for example, Moses or Abraham or Moses or Jesus were plotters, they're schemers. No one has ever made like a serious accusation, or Muhammad was a plotter or a schemer trying to sort of take control of people's lives or trying to scheme against people. No one has any sort of basis for that. And it's interesting. If I were to see things that way, I would realize that there is no value in denial, because they don't really have people who try to convince me of denial or try to take me away from the truth or try to take me away from my human reality, or like kind of what Abdurrahman was alluding to earlier. Do they really have your best interest at heart? Do they really care? Or are they just trying to prove something for their own self-satisfaction? And so that they're seen as, some sort of intellectual, or, that they're some sort of thought leader in society, that, people are going to follow them. When you really sort of analyze these people, if you look at it like with some sort of insight, you see that's what it's all about. It has nothing to do with the truth. No, nobody's really cared about the truth. They really cared about proving something else wrong. Nothing about the truth in and of itself. So if you look at the shadow of the verse, or what it doesn't say, I find that interesting as well, that the truth, or the prophets and the companions, or the scholars and the saints, they don't have anything to prove. They're not trying to. In fact, actually they've been, historically been persecuted. The prophets have been persecuted. It's not like, Jesus was some sort of king, or Moses or Muhammad was persecuted for 13 years. So it's just, the complete narrative is totally flipped in that regard.
Yeah, thank you, Suhail. I agree. And thank you for those thoughts. I guess one other thing that I wanted to just briefly touch upon, and this was talked about a little bit last week, was this part of the text that we're reading about overall, big picture wise, is about the style of exposition in the Quran. And so far, like, the verses that we've been looking at have been verses that are in the form of questions, right? The style of these verses encourage me to engage in a dialogue, not just with the Quran itself, but also with myself, right? And sometimes, like mentioned last week, these questions are easier to reflect on, think about, than if they were declarative or descriptive sentences. And so they're a sort of invitation to dialogue. And I thought it was interesting that Nursi as well kind of poses questions immediately after, kind of continuing that style of it, I suppose. And also really making you think about it, like, if not making you take it for granted, but making you ask the same question in your own mind and try to come upon an answer for it, even if the answer is kind of inherent within the verses themselves. So I just wanted to touch upon that as well. I thought it was an important point, and an important way to recognize how the Quran communicates with me. Brother Yusuf, please go ahead.
Just a tiny note in here. So when the author mentions their trickery, so he says they want to trick other people, and they say you either a soothsayer or possessed or a sorcerer. So one common thing in these accusations are as if the messenger himself in the first place, like his understanding or the way he took the message is being put into question in here. Like he himself was not a clear-minded person, because soothsayer or sorcerer, they are just talk about guesses, so they are not putting their feet onto something firm. Or a possessed person, like a person, so mixes up truth and falsehood. So as if the messenger's understanding is being put into question in here, which is also an interesting thing, because messenger's understanding, or my understanding of the world versus messenger's understanding of the world. This is another thing to consider, because one trickery about messengerhood generally is messenger was a man like us too. Yeah, indeed he was. But the way he was communicated, once I tried to define that and say that, well, it was the way I am being communicated, for instance, saying this sort of a thing, which is not accessible to me. I don't know if this is the case or it's not. I can make a statement about why it should not be, but insisting that, well, he was a human like human beings, in the sense that the way he received revelation is the way I am thinking about some new ideas. Even lower than that, he might be a possessed person, or he might be a soothsayer. We have such people. They are doing guesswork. So as if with the apparent beautiful way of explaining that, well, he was not an angel, he was not out of this world, he was a man. So yeah, this is necessary for me to make him relatable to me. But when it comes to how he received the message, then shall I keep doing the same? Because I remember listening to a like modern day Muslim philosopher. He was quite surely, like without any hesitation, he was saying that revelation was dream. He was saying, like we see some things in the dream, revelation must have been a type of a dream. And he was so sure about this when he was speaking about it. But what I'm trying to say in here is, once I reduce or put the perception of the messenger into question, then I already defeated the messenger and the messengerhood altogether, because he became like me. And as much as I am not sure about my conclusions, then I can question what comes out of messenger's mouth. Because I'm not even talking about what I understand from messenger's speech. Now I am questioning the understanding of the messenger himself in the first place. This is why the verse says, indeed, it is us who revealed this scripture, and we are the protector of it, the Creator says. The Creator says, I know what I'm talking about and to whom I revealed this message. But there is this other trickery, a wide trickery, which is, and as the author, I think, is slightly alluding to in here, based on the very initial verses that we have studied, the perception of the messenger is being put into the question as you would question anybody's perception, which is I think, a very big source of trickery. And there are tons of examples of this that I can right now think of that's available within Muslim community, within secular circles and whatnot. But understanding the distinction to the extent I would say a categorical distinction between my understanding of truth versus how the messenger himself must have received message is a different thing. So maybe sometimes, as in this example of cunning hypocrites or the deniers, disbelievers, sometimes the trick starts there, or maybe nowadays more than ever it starts there.
Thank you, Brother Yusuf, once again for your comments. Really, throughout this whole discussion, they've been really valuable. I see that we have just a few minutes left. If anyone has, I don't know, any thoughts, last minute comments, questions that they'd like to share, now is a good time for that. Give it a moment. Okay. If not, I guess maybe we can read that second verse here and think about it a bit for next week, and also in continuation of like this discussion as a whole that we've had, as well as about the importance of messengership, notion of messengership here. So the verse goes, "Or have they a God other than God? Exalted is God, far above the things they associate with him." Or like the Magians, who imagined two separate gods called the creator of good and creator of evil. Or like the idolaters and worshippers of causes, who attribute a sort of godhead to different causes and imagine each of them to be a source of support for them. Do they rely on other gods and contest you? Do they consider themselves free of any need of you? That means they have become blind and do not see the perfect order and flawless harmony throughout the universe, which is as clear as day. And inshallah, I'll stop there for today. I think this verse that I just read is in many ways a summarization of all the other questions that of all the other verses that kind of led up to it in this chapter. But inshallah, we can end here today and talk about it next week. Jazakumullah khair for everyone for being here, participating, speaking, listening, all of that. Inshallah, I will see you all next week. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر